message in general for anybody in their mid-careers and trying to figure out their role in development sectors, my message will be just anchor yourself on your drivers. What drives you? What gets you excited? What gives you the energy? What gets you out of bed?
Welcome back, everybody. Bruce Baker, founder of Collective Responsibility, here today with another episode of the Sustainable Ambassador Podcast. This episode, I'm extremely honored to be joined by Talha Khan, who's the Executive Director of the Pakistan Environmental Trust. Talha is actually a former student of mine, spent years in McKinsey before he took up his current position. Talha, welcome to the Sustainable Ambassador Podcast. As a starting point, would you mind introducing yourself and a little bit about why you decided to leave McKinsey to save the world?
I was essentially set up because Pakistan, one of the countries, as most of the audience might know, is one of the most affected countries by climate change. And so there's a dire need to do a lot of work in the country. And a few years back, when McKinsey did a pro bono piece of work with the government of Pakistan to figure out how can we mobilize more finance for the country, one of the insights that came out of that work was that if there's an entity that is able to establish those programs and engage global organizations to really on some of those challenges, but really an action plan on how to solve those if this finance is mobilized, that could really move the needle for the country. And that led to the birth of our organization.
So as a bit of a background, what are the challenges that Pakistan faces?
If you heard about the floods that happened last year, the amount of economic damage those floods caused for Pakistan was more than the economic impact of any climate disasters across the world over the past 3 decades. That carries a lot of weight for a developing country like Pakistan, where the GDP per capita is below the $2,000 mark, a population of 250 million people, interest rates right now at 23% in the country. So there are multiple different challenges that the country is facing from all different angles, right? It's basically what we term as a poly crisis But if I laser focus on climate, I mean, climate is one of the threats that we're trying to pull because as a country, we're facing, when it comes to flood disasters, Pakistan and this region in general, Pakistan, Nepal, have some of the highest mountains in the world, some of the biggest and the oldest glaciers in the world as well. So the meltdown of those glaciers has direct impact.
What are you trying to do as an organization and how do you do it?
So we're kind of laser focused on very specific areas that we're trying to make an effort and do our work. And those areas are specifically industrial decarbonization. So how can we get our private sector, our industry to decarbonize, which would then translate into economic resilience for Pakistani private sector. And then later on, more growth opportunities, more jobs, more livelihoods for the people in Pakistan. The second part we're focused on is on nature conservation and rewilding. And the idea over there is that if we can create big projects that are focused on, restoring the nature landscape in the country. There are massive pieces of barren land in the country that can be revitalized, rewilded, and we essentially are planning to use carbon markets as a tool to mobilize finance for those projects and again create more livelihoods and more jobs. The third point, just quick one, is we're also set up as an incubator. So the idea is that we incubate these projects, get them off the ground, spin them out as separate companies, and then identify other areas to work on as well.
How did your work at McKinsey set you up or prepare you to take on this role?
McKinsey essentially is one of my mentors and partners in McKinsey used to tell me that McKinsey is like a brain gym where you go in with like heavy weights and heavy lifting, and it really builds your muscle and really builds your kind of brain muscles, right? The problem solving skill is something that I really appreciate. At McKinsey, you get exposed to very, very, very senior people. So that kind of exposure, one thing that it kind of gets the sort of, how do you say it, right? It gets the intimidation out of you because you've been exposed to so much stuff. At the end of the day, you realize that everybody's trying to solve the same problems and they have the right intent. So you don't get intimidated by those settings. That helps you elevate the conversation quite effectively when you're engaging a similar audience in other contexts, right? And I think the third thing which McKinsey taught me was just how to build up a team and how to lead the team and how to be able to sort of learn and grow as you grow along with your team, right? Because in my role right now, I'm not just learning how to solve these problems, but I'm also learning how to become an effective leader for my team. And I face those issues day in and day out, and it's so crucial.
You have the purpose. You're pretty clear on that. You have the comfort or the resources that you are comfortable with. But what gave you the confidence to think that you could do this job? Like, you weren't a climate scientist. You didn't come from this background or this industry. What made you say, one, it's important, okay, I got it, but two, what made you thought that you could do it?
That's another benefit of working at McKinsey is that McKinsey is a bit of like a revolving door. You never really leave McKinsey. You can always go back to McKinsey, right? So I had a backup option with McKinsey as well. That if I want to go back, I can always go back. And I think on the spiritual side, it's always been. I mean, I am a very sort of spiritual person, a person of faith. So I always had that sense that if you're doing something with the right intent, things out. I mean, whether you call it karma, whether you call it Sufism in Islam, whether you call it whatever, right? It's just that sense that if you've got the right intent and you're putting all your effort behind it, things will work out.
If you look back over the last 2 years, what are the tool sets or the skills that you brought from corporate into this that you think have been the most valuable today? Because you're talking about fundraising and building a team as a startup. I mean, these weren't things that you had done in the past necessarily. But what were the skills or tool sets that let you raise that money, that let you build this team, that let you create a new organization, or not a new organization, but create an organization that would make you useless in the end of this?
First of all, I'd had to bank on my strengths and being very aware of what are the things that I am good at as a leader and just really leverage them. Because you can raise money through multiple different angles as long as you're really sure about what you as an individual bring to the table, right? So I think you really need to be authentic to yourself and understand what you're bringing to the table. And I think what I bring to the table in terms of my strength was that entrepreneurial skill. Meet a lot of people, trying to have those conversations, connect with one person, then get connection to another person, and through that, tap into that pot of money, and then start to build the team as it comes along as well. But once that was done, the challenge I faced was that I was always a consultant and advisor to others, right? I never led a team in terms of an organization and build up the nuances of it.
Right.
So when I started doing that, I had to be very iterative and be very self-aware of what I was doing. So for example, one of the feedbacks I used to get from my team was that I can be quite intimidating in the room, right? When I'm talking to my team members and not give them space to sort of come in. The other feedback I got from my team was that I am very outcome focused, which as you can, if you're just listening to the past 10 minutes of it, you'll probably get a sense of it. But not everybody's like that. I mean, some people are driven by other people and their affiliation and their relationships. Some people are driven by the discipline of the work that they have and their other rivals. So it's creating that space that allows everyone to grow and develop and not everyone to surely focus on that outcome, because that can create a very different culture. So just having an idea that allows me to get this feedback and gives people the space to give me that feedback, and then having the ability to learn from it and build and grow, right? I think that proved to be quite crucial for me. And I think the third thing, which is important, is resilience. I mean, there is nothing that we'll do which will work the first time, the second time. Something might work the first time, will fail the second time. Just having that resilience and being able to sort of just, stand back from it and keep going, I think that is quite crucial.
In that context, what do you view as your role, or what are the most important things you do as an executive director of this foundation, this trust?
So in my first 6 months, the only thing I was doing is hiring people and raising money. From 6 months on now, I've been focused on three things. One, talent. How do I really hire the best talent in the market and come and join us? Or how do I maximize the effectiveness and the productivity of the talent I have in the team? That takes up 50% of my time. The other 25% I spend on risk and compliance, because there's always a sword hanging in my back that we've done something that is wrong and somebody will come. Because as an NGO or a non-profit company, you actually have more eyes on you than a private sector company. You're being checked on multiple different levels. So risk and compliance is the second. Interestingly, over the course of the past couple of months, I've seen my role changing now. So it's the third shift that I'm going to make in my role, which is I'm trying to take away that problem solving part and getting it done more in my team so that they solve most of their problems themselves. And I'm becoming the chief rainmaker for the team. And my sense is that role of mine will now remain consistent for another 2 or 3 years to expand the revenue base and to open up opportunities for the organization. And my message is, I think everybody should just bear in mind that there's no one style that would work for your organization. It really depends where your organization is at and what kind of CEO do you need to be.
What are the tools that you found the most effective to really, delegation of your own responsibilities so that you can then feel comfortable with them as you're going off to do the needed job of the moment?
What I'm learning and what I'm seeing is there are 4 things that are working for us. One, really painting the vision of what that organization and the way of working would look like if we're to able to do these things. The way we do the vision part is by having those things clearly defined in our values. For example, we've got 5 major values, but 2 of them really focus on this part. One is that one of the values is focused around on one of the part of the value is focused on obligation to dissent. So every person in our team is not just required, they're actually obligated to challenge any opinion or idea that comes up. That creates that sense of ownership in the team in terms of being able to challenge and have a view and opinion. And then, so that is important to have those defined in your values. The second value we literally have a value on around ownership, which is you need to have an ownership mindset, which basically means that everybody is responsible for delivering an outcome. And everybody in our team, from analyst up to me, is responsible for delivering an outcome. And that doesn't mean that you need to know how to get that outcome, but you need to make sure that you're engaging the right people to get that outcome. Right. Then comes the part around how do you bring it to life, right? And that's where role modeling comes in. I think that's the piece I'm realizing, which is how do I model those values myself? How do my directors model these values, right? And bring them to life when we're engaging with the team. If I'm engaging with my team and then the team starts challenging me and I tell them that, listen, I don't want to hear that. It's either my way or the highway. Then obviously I can have whatever obligation to dissent value, but it's not working out because they can't even challenge me. So whenever I'm in position or situations like that, I have to make sure that I create that space and allow the team to challenge me and allow my directors to challenge me quite visibly in front of the whole team. Because when they see the directors challenging me quite openly and me being okay with it, it'll create space for the rest of the team to do similar things. I think the third piece, which I found important, is the process part, right? How do you implement these processes? And the way we're doing that is we do that through our different meetings that we have and trying to sort of set up that culture where, if you're working on something, on a topic, you need to be able to sort of problem solve with the team, setting up those meetings, problem solving with them, having some sort of structure to those problem solving sessions. But most importantly, our performance review process is extremely crucial in there. So in PET, in our organization, people don't get reviewed on their KPIs or OKRs. They get reviewed on their values. And our values are defined in a manner that if you're following those values, you should be delivering your KPIs and OKRs. And the review process happens 360-degree feedback from everyone. And the reviewer is not your line manager or program director. So everybody in PET gets reviewed by someone who's never worked with that person or has very little exposure to that person. So that we remove any bias or any favoritism from the system, right? And the last and the fourth part that we found to be quite effective is the technology part. So how are we using our Slack more proactively, right? Rather than setting up those meetings and having a meeting on every topic, can we exchange ideas over Slack?
What advice would you give to other mid-career professionals like yourself, perhaps a senior McKinsey consultant who's looking at a similar decision that wants to jump out, go into the nonprofit space, maybe the government space, to tackle an issue like this? Like, what should they consider? What should they prepare themselves for? How should they get ready for that jump?
I mean, 2 messages, right? I mean, one message in general for anybody who is in their mid-careers and trying to figure out their role in the development sector space. My message will be just anchor yourself on your drivers. What drives you? What gets you excited? What gives you the energy? What gets you out of bed? In my case, it was solving complex problems and challenging myself that really excited me. And I anchored myself on that and took a lot of decisions based on that. My second message in general, hedge your bet. It's important for you to have safety mechanisms around. It's important to give you the security that you need to really focus on the task at hand. If you go head in on the deep end without any safety net and things go bad, it can create a bit of panic and anxiety, which is never good. My advice from McKinsey people who are trying to get in development space is that development space is a very different kettle of fish. In a traditional development structure, the culture and the way of working is very different to what McKinsey folks or the investment bankers are used to dealing with. So be aware of those blind spots because they will be there. In my case, I had the benefit of setting up the organization from scratch, so I could define the culture the way we wanted to shape that culture up. But if I had gone in a standard development sector organization, I would have faced a lot of challenges with the culture.
If you look back over the last 2 years, one, are you glad that you took this experience, or do you wish you'd stayed in McKinsey? And second is, what are the pros and cons? Like, if you look back now, how are those different? Is it different than you thought it'd be? Is it the same? Is it better? Is it worse? Like, what are some of the benefits and downsides that you didn't plan for, that you didn't think about?
The single moment where I regretted the decision to join PT and go for it. I mean, first of all, I'm much happier today because I'm working on something that I'm really passionate about. And I'm actually building up a team from ground up, which is super exciting and super challenging to me.
Yeah.
I think the drawbacks of taking this decision is obviously the opportunity cost is pretty high. Leaving McKinsey and doing this, purely from a financial perspective, does give you a head. Also, be very mindful that in terms of my family, I mean, we had to move from one culture to another culture altogether. That's been a bit of a challenge for me.
Yeah.
But I think I would take this decision any day again. I've never looked back. Keep going for it as long as I can, and I'm a much happier person today. To be honest.
That's awesome, man. Thank you very much for your time. This has been a lot of fun. Great reconnecting and the work that you're doing there. It's inspiring to see my students after 8-10 years coming around and seeing the same things that we were talking about then, and actually, not just talking about it and complaining about it, but actually putting your own effort, your own resources into this fight. So it's great to have you on the team. You're doing wonderful work there. It's fun to watch.